Welcome to the Deep Dive. In this conversation, we are exploring the story of HMT, the industrial giant that laid the foundations of independent India's industrial growth. We're going back to a time when the private sector was reluctant and, quite frankly, not mature enough to invest money in these really risky businesses which required deep technical and managerial expertise and, a very long-term vision. So the government stepped in. And the result was a company that became known as the timekeepers to the nation and the creators of the mother machines of India. Today, we are exploring the colossal rise and, the heartbreaking fall of HMT.
It's great to be here. And, as soon as you say those three letters, HMT, it immediately triggers something for millions of people. It's a deep, almost visceral nostalgia.
Oh, absolutely.
If you grew up in India during the 70s or 80s, HMT wasn't just a brand. It was a companion.
It was everywhere. You couldn't walk down the street without seeing it on someone's wrist. A real fixture.
You had the Janata, the Pilot, the Kohinoor. Right. And these weren't just names of watch models. They were cultural icons. They were the standard gifts for graduations, for first jobs, for weddings. They symbolized a kind of sturdy, reliable self-reliance.
I think that's the perfect word for it, sturdy.
But, and this is crucial for our deep dive today, while that nostalgia is very real and very warm, our mission is to look way beyond the wristwatches.
Right. The watches are just the tip of the iceberg, really. They were the public face. But the factory behind that face was massive.
Exactly. We are analyzing the massive arc of a public sector undertaking, or a PSU. This is a business case study on a national scale.
So what's the plan? Where do we start?
We're going to cover its spectacular rise, the massive social obligations they met, which is a fascinating topic in itself, and then we have to take a hard look at the specific structural reasons for their decline.
And finally, we'll look at what, if anything, the future holds. It's a story of engineering feats that will honestly surprise you. I was shocked by some of the things they actually built.
And it's a story of the clash between policy and profitability, a fundamental tension. So let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack this. To really understand HMT, we have to understand the world it was born into. We're talking about the post-independence landscape, roughly 1947 to the 1950s. What was the economic reality of India at that time?
It was a reality of scarcity and massive ambition. You have a newly independent nation strapped for cash, but absolutely desperate to modernize.
A huge task.
A monumental one. And the core economic reality was that there was a massive private sector gap.
Meaning private companies just weren't stepping up to the plate.
They couldn't, and in some cases they probably wouldn't. Private businesses at the time lacked the capital for these huge, large-scale industrial projects.
We're talking about things like steel plants, machine tool factories.
Exactly. These things take immense upfront investment, and the returns don't come for years, maybe even decades. It's a very long waiting game.
And private capital is usually looking for a quicker return.
Of course. The private sector at the time preferred high-return, lower-risk ventures like trading or textiles. They just weren't interested in the heavy lifting of building capital goods. The ROI horizon was just too far out for them.
So the government essentially said, fine, if you won't do it, we'll do it ourselves.
Precisely. And this philosophy, this necessity, birthed what we can call the three pillars of the public sector approach.
Okay, what's the first pillar?
First, there was a lack of capital argument. The government had to step in where private money wouldn't go because only the state had the borrowing power and the political will to fund these massive infrastructure projects.
That makes sense. A purely practical consideration. What was the second pillar?
Strategic self-reliance. This was huge. The goal was to reduce imports. India's leaders knew you needed to build core industries, steel, power, and crucially, machine tools indigenously.
Because you can't be a real industrial nation if you have to import the machines that make your products.
You can't. If you want to be truly sovereign, you have to be able to make your own tools. It's that fundamental.
And the third pillar. This one feels more ideological.
It absolutely was. The third pillar was social equality. The stated goal of the government at the time was a socialistic pattern of society.
So what did that mean in practice?
It meant public ownership gave the government control over pricing to keep things affordable for the masses. It meant they could provide stable, lifelong employment with benefits, effectively setting the standard for what a good job looked like in India.
And it also determined where the factories were built, right?
Yes, and that's a key point we'll come back to. It meant they could place factories in underdeveloped, remote regions to spread the wealth, rather than just clustering them in the big established cities.
That sounds incredibly noble. But I can already see how it would create a conflict when you're trying to run a for-profit business.
It does. And this brings us to what's often called the paradox of profit.
The central tension of the HMT story.
It really is. There was a genuine ideological clash at the highest levels of power. You had Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, the architect of this public sector vision. And on the other side, you had industrialists like J.R.D. Tata.
And there's a very famous anecdote about this, isn't there?
There is. And it just perfectly encapsulates the mindset of the time.
Tell us about it.
J.R.D. Tata and Nehru were having a conversation. Tata, who naturally believed in the efficiency and necessity of the private market, suggested to Nehru that the public sector enterprises needed to make a profit to be sustainable.
A pretty reasonable argument. You need surplus cash to reinvest, to grow, to innovate.
You'd think so. But Nehru's response was, reportedly, quite sharp. He retorted, "Never talk to me about the word profit. It is a dirty word."
Wow. A dirty word. That is a strong, powerful stance.
It tells you everything you need to know about the DNA of these companies. The expert analysis here really highlights that this mindset prioritized political and social goals over commercial viability from day one.
So success wasn't measured in rupees.
Not at first. Profit wasn't the metric of success. Nation building was. But as we're about to see, you can't ignore commercial viability forever. Gravity eventually catches up with you.
So with that philosophy as the bedrock, HMT is born. Let's get into the rise of the giant. How did it all begin?
It was conceived in 1949, not long after independence, and then officially incorporated in 1953. And the mandate was just massive. It wasn't just to make tools, it was a big commitment to manufacture mother machines.
Mother machines. Can you break that down for us? It's a great term.
It really is. Think of it this way. If you want to build a car engine, you need a machine to bore out the metal cylinders. If you want to build a turbine for a dam, you need a massive, super precise machine to shape the blades.
Okay, I'm with you.
A mother machine is a machine that makes other machines. Lathes, grinders, drills, milling machines. HMT was literally built to make the tools that would build the rest of modern industrial India.
That is about as foundational a role as you can get in an economy.
It is. And they were smart about it. They didn't try to reinvent the wheel. They recognized that India didn't have the technical expertise yet, so they went looking for the best in the world.
And they found them in Switzerland.
They did. They entered a key joint venture with Unwritten Machine Tool Works from Switzerland.
That's a serious pedigree. Swiss engineering is legendary for its precision.
The best you could get. They set up the first factory in Jalahali, Bangalore in 1954. And from that single point, it was just an explosion of growth. It was rapid and it was expansive.
This is the period you call the alphabet soup of growth.
You chuckles. Yes, we do.
Because they just kept adding Roman numerals to the factory names, right? HMTI, HMT2.
Yes, they weren't very creative with the naming, but the scale of the ambition was truly impressive. You had HMTI and 2 in Bangalore. Then they went north to set up HMT the 3rd in Pinjore, Haryana.
And then south again.
HMT Fee in Kalamassery, Kerala. And HMTV in Hyderabad. They were planting these industrial flags all across the map of India.
And they didn't just stick to machine tools, which is what most people forget. They diversified like crazy.
It did. And this is where the brand really touched the common man, the average person. In 1962, they made the pivotal move into watches.
Another collaboration.
Yes, with the Citizen Watch Company of Japan. The first watch factory was set up in Bangalore, and suddenly India had its own timepieces.
It's hard to overstate how big a deal that was. Before HMT, watches were largely imported luxury items, or even smuggled in.
HMT democratized timekeeping. They made it accessible and affordable for everyone.
But it wasn't just watches. I recall reading they got into tractors, too. A totally different product line.
A completely different field. Yes, in 1971, they collaborated with Motokov from Czechoslovakia.
So look at that pattern. You've got Swiss machine tools, Japanese watches, and Czech tractors.
They were gathering the best global expertise they could find and then localizing it for Indian conditions. But it didn't even stop there. They got into lamps, printing machines, dairy machinery, die casting.
Wow.
And eventually, high-tech CNC systems.
It sounds like they were trying to be everything to everyone.
In a way, they were. They were the industrial engine of the country. By the time they hit their peak in the late 80s and early 90s, HMT was a behemoth.
Give us some numbers. What did that peak look like?
The stats are staggering. 16 manufacturing units, 22 different divisions spread across 10 states, and they had 30,000 employees.
30,000? That's the size of a small town.
An entire ecosystem. And their revenue at its peak was around Rs 9,000 million. But again, sticking to that core philosophy, the why we discussed earlier, they were meeting massive social obligations.
You mean the townships?
Entire townships. If you go to these factory sites today, Pinjore is a great example. They didn't just build a factory. They built schools, hospitals, post offices, huge housing colonies.
So they were fulfilling the government's mandate for regional development and social welfare.
Absolutely. They were doing it in a way that private companies simply wouldn't have. They were building civilization around the factories.
It really paints a picture of a company that was more like a mini-state than a corporation.
That's a very good way to put it.
But I want to pivot for a second because I think a lot of people, especially younger people, dismiss HMT as just that old watch company that failed.
Yeah.
But the engineering capability was world-class.
Oh, absolutely. This is the proof of competence section, and it's so important. We need to dispel the myth that HMT failed because they were bad engineers. They were brilliant engineers.
Look, where's the proof?
They weren't just making consumer goods. They were powering the most strategic, the most high-tech sectors of India.
You're talking defense and space.
Yes. Let's look at a few specific case studies. First, naval systems. HMT's Kalamazoo unit developed something called directing gear for naval ships.
Directing gear, what does that do?
It's a critical auxiliary to the sonar systems.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a ship on the open ocean. It's pitching, rolling, and yawing with the waves.
Right, constant motion.
So if your sensitive sonar sensor is fixed to the hull of the ship, it's swinging around wildly, making it practically impossible to get a clear signal or track a submarine.
Makes sense.
The directing gear is a high-precision gyroscopic stabilization mechanism. It keeps the sensor pointed true, locked on target, regardless of how much the ship moves.
That sounds incredibly complex.
It's extremely high-stakes, high-precision engineering. This was a collaboration with MPOL and Bharat Electronics Ltd., and it was critical for import substitution. Instead of buying the sensitive tech from abroad, HMT built it in India.
That's a huge strategic contribution. What else?
Then there's the railways, and this is very recent history, which shows they still have the capability. In 2022, the Kalamazoo unit developed a surface wheel lathe.
The lathes are all train wheels.
Exactly. Train wheels take an incredible beating. Over thousands and thousands of kilometers, they get worn down, they develop flat spots, or the shape of the flange changes.
And you can't just throw away a massive train wheel. They must be incredibly expensive.
They are. So this machine, this surface wheel lathe, reprofiles the rail wheels while they're still on the axle. It shaves off slivers of metal with micron-level precision to restore the perfect geometry. It's essential for safety and alignment.
And HMT built this.
They did. It's a massive, complex piece of machinery, and HMT's version has 95% indigenous content. It's used for the maintenance of modern trains, including the Vande Bharat Express.
And did I hear a connection to the moon mission as well?
You did. This one is really impressive. HMT contributed to the Chandrayaan-3 mission.
Oh, what did they do?
They machined specific critical components for the solid rocket motors. Now, when you are machining parts for a space rocket, there is absolutely zero margin for error.
None.
We are talking about micron-level tolerances on materials that are incredibly hard and difficult to cut. The fact that ISRO trusted HMT with this work speaks volumes about their underlying technical skill.
So let's look at that client list. We have ISRO, the Pabha Atomic Research Center, Coal India, Indian Railways.
And even the big private giants. Bajaj and Hero were buying HMT machines for their production lines for years.
The client list is a who's who of Indian industry, public and private.
It is. They proved time and again that they could build the best. The competence was never the core issue. The engineering was solid.
Okay, so this is where the story gets really interesting.
Yeah.
And, frankly, tragic.
It is.
If they had the talent, if they had the technology, and for a long time, the market dominance. How did it all go so wrong? We need to talk about the fall. And it seems like there wasn't just one single reason.
No, it was a perfect storm, a confluence of factors. We can break it down into four main reasons, and they were all happening sequentially and, in some cases, simultaneously.
Where do we start?
We have to start with the first one, which goes right back to that founding philosophy. We can call it the geography of inefficiency.
This is about where they decided to build the factories, right? The social equality pillar.
Yes. Remember the regional balance experiment? The unwritten government policy was essentially to set up a new factory in a different state every year to spread development and, create jobs across the country.
Politically, that's a great talking point. It wins votes.
It does. But economically, it's an absolute disaster.
Why? Because you're duplicating everything.
Exactly. You end up with this incredibly dispersed footprint, which means massive, unavoidable overheads. You're building new administration blocks, new townships, new water and power infrastructure every single time. There are no economies of scale.
And you're duplicating people, too.
You have duplication of human capital, separate HR departments, finance teams, security teams, management structures, all at every single location.
I can't even imagine the logistics. That must have been a nightmare.
A total nightmare. Just put yourself in the shoes of a client. Say you're a big company and you want to set up a full production line. You need milling machines, drilling machines, and grinding machines.
Okay.
But HMT makes its best milling machines in Haryana, the drilling machines are made in Kerala, and the grinding machines are in Rajasthan.
So as the customer, I have to coordinate with 3 separate factories, 3 separate management teams, probably 3 different sets of paperwork, just to get my line running.
It was incredibly inefficient. It drove customers crazy. There was no single point of contact, no unified system.
And on top of that structural problem, they were forced to play doctor to sick companies.
The sick unit syndrome. This is a huge drain. HMT was profitable and healthy in its early decades. So the government, wanting to save jobs and other failing public sector units, forced HMT to take them over.
So they had to absorb their losses.
Absorb their losses, their outdated machinery, their bloated workforces. They had to take over the Machine Tools Corporation in Edgemere, Praga Machine Tools, Indo-Nippon Precision Bearings.
Ooh, these were all companies that were already bleeding money.
And HMT had to use its own profits, its own resources to prop them up. It was a constant drain on their finances and their management's attention.
It's like asking a marathon runner to not only run the race, but also carry a backpack full of rocks.
That's a perfect analogy. And eventually, the runner collapses. It cannibalized their own success.
So that's the geography problem, the structural inefficiency. Let's move on to the people problem. Reason number 2 for the fall, the talent exodus.
This one is perhaps the most painful part of the story because it was so predictable and so preventable. It all revolves around what we can call the pay revision trap.
And this involves the Department of Public Enterprise. It's the DPE, right?
Yes, the DPE has very strict guidelines for all PSUs. And the core rule is this: pay revisions or salary hikes are directly linked to the company's profitability.
I think I can see the catch-22 coming a mile away.
It's a death spiral. HMT started losing money because of all the overheads and sick units we just discussed. Because they were officially loss-making, they were not allowed to give their employees pay raises.
So their salaries were just frozen.
HMT employees were stuck on 1997 pay scales for decades. They only got dearness allowance adjustments to account for inflation, but the base pay never moved.
Meanwhile, the Indian economy liberalizes in 1991, and the private sector starts booming.
And offering competitive modern salaries. So what happens? The best people leave.
Of course, they have to.
They leave in droves. There was one event that was so significant, we call it the Titan shock.
This was in the watch division.
Yes. In 1986, just 2 years after Titan entered the watch market, 350 of HMT's best engineers, designers, and executives defected to Titan.
350, that's not a leak, that's a dam bursting.
It completely gutted their watch division. They took all that institutional knowledge, all that expertise with them, and the pattern just kept repeating itself.
It wasn't a one-time event.
Not at all. Even as late as 2010, the story was the same. Young, bright engineers from top institutions like the IITs would join HMT for the training because the hands-on training was still considered world-class.
And then they'd leave.
They'd stay for a year or two, get that training on their resume, and then immediately leave for better offers in the private sector. It got so bad they couldn't even retain chartered accountants or company secretaries.
You can't run a giant company if you can't keep your finance and compliance teams.
It becomes impossible.
Yeah.
The very people you need to turn the ship around are the first ones to leave.
So that brain drain leads us directly to reason number 3, management and IT failures. We often hear that the public sector is slow and bureaucratic, but was it just slowness or was it a fundamental failure in planning?
It was a mix of both, but there is a specific damning report that lays it all bare, the JITE report of 1990.
JICA being the Japan International Cooperation Agency.
That's right. The Japanese government sent a team to do a deep study of HMT's operations and recommend a path for restructuring and modernization.
What did they find?
Their key finding was brutal. They said, I'm paraphrasing, that the corporate planning department was fundamentally inadequate to promote strategic management.
In other words, the brain of the company wasn't working. The people in charge of strategy didn't know how to do it.
That's a blunt way to put it, but yes. And what happened with that report is the most ironic, most painful part.
What happened?
The responsibility for implementing the fixes, for carrying out the JICA recommendations, was given to the very same inadequate planning team that the report had just criticized.
You're kidding me.
I'm not. So naturally, nothing changed. It was bureaucracy protecting itself. And then in the late 90s, they made an absolutely fatal error.
What was that?
They closed the Machine Tools R&D division.
They closed research and development in a technology company.
It was the death knell for innovation. You cannot survive in the world of machine tools, a field where technology changes every 5 years, if you don't have an R&D department. They officially stopped inventing and started just trying to survive.
And this paralysis extended to their IT systems as well.
It did. And the tragedy is HMT was actually an early adopter. They had mainframe computers back in 1982.
That's pretty early for India. That's forward thinking.
It was, but they failed to upgrade. The world moved on to personal computers, to agile networks, and HMT was stuck with these expensive, cumbersome legacy systems.
Did they ever try to modernize?
They did much later. Around 2014-15, they tried to implement SAP, a massive enterprise resource planning software. But the implementation failed.
Why? What went wrong?
The same old story. A lack of clear vision from the top, and again, a lack of skilled staff because they couldn't pay market rates. You can't pull off a complex digital transformation if you don't have the IT talent to manage it.
So we have bad geography, a massive brain drain, and total management paralysis. But we still have to talk about the products themselves.
Yes, reason number 4.
The debacles involving the two things HMT was most famous for, watches and tractors. Let's start with the quartz crisis.
This is a classic business school case study on what happens when a market leader gets disrupted and refuses to see it coming.
Set the scene for us.
In the late 60s and early 70s, the global watch industry went through a revolution. The shift from mechanical watches, the old-fashioned ones you have to wind up, to quartz technology.
Which uses a battery and a quartz crystal and is far more accurate and much cheaper to manufacture.
Exactly. The Swiss watch industry was almost wiped out by it, and HMT, which was built on mechanical watch technology, they just missed the boat.
They didn't just miss it. From what I understand, they actively denied it was coming.
They did. Their internal management believed that India wasn't ready for quartz. They argued that mechanical watches had at least another 10 to 12 years of market dominance. They were arrogant about their position.
That sounds like the famous last words of so many failed companies.
It was. And then Titan arrived in 1984. They came to the market focused solely on quartz. And they didn't just sell technology, they sold design. They treated watches as fashion accessories, not just utilitarian instruments.
And they just took over the market.
They completely redefined it and captured the imagination of the new urban Indian consumer.
And while Titan was innovating in advertising, HMT was busy building what you call political factories.
This goes back to the political interference we discussed earlier. It was a huge self-inflicted wound. In 1975, under political pressure, they set up a watch factory in Srinagar, Kashmir. It was celebrated as the first PSU in Jammu and Kashmir.
A move for political symbolism, not business logic.
Purely. There was zero business logic to putting a precision watch factory, which requires a stable supply chain and skilled labor, in a remote, mountainous region with difficult logistics and security issues.
And they did it again, didn't they?
They did. In 1985, another watch component factory was set up in Renaba, in a backward area of Nainital. Again, purely due to political pressure.
So at the exact moment they should have been consolidating to fight Titan, they were spreading themselves even thinner in illogical locations.
Precisely. Spreading their production across 5 far-flung locations completely destroyed their efficiency. They couldn't compete on price, on quality control, or on agility.
Okay, so that's the watch story. What about the tractors? I know farmers who still swear by their old HMT tractors. They were workhorses.
They were. They were very reliable, sturdy machines, but like the watches, they became outdated. After the year 2000, private players like Mahindra and Mahindra, John Deere, Sonalika, they came in with tractors that had better features, more power, better fuel efficiency.
And better financing.
You hit the nail on the head. Credit. The private companies partnered with banks to offer easy loans and financing options to farmers. HMT, as a government entity, just didn't have that commercial agility.
And was there ever a chance to save the tractor business?
There was. A huge missed opportunity. The government tried to divest, to sell a stake in the tractor business twice. Once in 1997 and again in 2007.
And there were buyers.
Big ones. Giants like Mahindra and John Deere were very interested.
So what happened? Why didn't the deal go through?
The usual reasons. The unions protested fiercely, politics got in the way, and the deals fell through. So eventually, those interested buyers just gave up and went and built their own plants instead.
HMT lost the chance to partner with a global leader.
They did. And finally, the tractor business was officially closed down in 2016.
So after all that, the closures, the downsizing, that brings us to today. What is the current state of this once mighty giant? What actually remains?
It's a shadow of its former self, there's no doubt. But it's not completely gone. HMT Machine Tools still exists, but it has a much more streamlined, narrow focus.
And the watches. Is HMT Watches completely dead?
The main division is officially closed, but, and this is a strange little epilogue, they still produce a small number of mechanical watches.
Where?
In a small auxiliary facility in Bangalore. They are mostly sold through their website or at the HMT Museum.
But wait, I've seen them online. They're kind of cool again, aren't they? There's a whole community of collectors.
That's the great irony. There has been a sudden resurgence in demand for vintage and new old stock HMT watches. It's like the Royal Enfield effect.
What was once seen as old and outdated is now seen as retro, authentic, and cool.
Exactly. But it's a tiny niche operation. It's not a real business revival.
And the physical legacy. The factories and townships, that's a bit more grim.
It is. It's actually quite haunting. If you visit the old townships, like the one in Pinjore, It's a sobering experience. You see these massive, deserted housing colonies, decaying schools, crumbling hospitals that once buzzed with the lives of 30,000 families.
It's ghost town imagery.
It really is. And it represents the sheer waste of all that locked up potential, all that infrastructure just sitting there.
So what does this all mean? We've walked through the rise and the fall. Is this the end of the story, or is there a way forward?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Can this industrial giant actually be revived? The experts who have studied this argue that it can, but it absolutely cannot be in its old form. The old HMT is dead.
So what needs to happen? What's the first step?
The first step has to be a strategic consolidation. We have to finally end the geography of inefficiency.
So shutting down some of the plants.
The expert argument is to consolidate all machine tool production from those 6 scattered locations down to just 1 or maybe 2 strategic sites. Pick the ones with the best infrastructure and talent pool and focus everything there.
And what do you do with all that other land and the empty factories?
You repurpose it. You're sitting on thousands of acres of prime industrial land. Give it to the railways for their expansion, hand it over to the defense sector, or privatize it and let other industries build there. But stop trying to run 6 half-empty factories.
And I assume they need to upgrade their technology in a big way.
Desperately. Modernization is the second key. They need to invest in a modern IT infrastructure, proper supply chain software, and update their physical plants with modern foundry and machine shops.
They need to look like a 2026 company, not a 1976 company that's just been patched up.
Precisely. But the biggest and most difficult fix isn't about land or machines, it's about leadership.
The board restructuring.
This is the critical fix. Right now, the leadership structure is a problem. Key positions, chairman, managing director, head of HR, head of finance, are often vacant for long periods, or they are held by people as a part-time additional charge.
You can't turn around a struggling giant with part-time leadership. That seems like a recipe for failure.
It is. So the proposed solution is bold. Reconstitute the entire board with full-time, capable, empowered professionals from the industry. And there's a radical idea about how to pay them, too. Yes, de-link executive compensation from short-term profitability for at least 10 years.
Why would you do that? It sounds counterintuitive.
Because if your bonus depends only on making a profit this year, you will never approve the big, expensive investment in R&D or a new factory that will only start making money 5 years from now.
Ah, I see. It encourages short-term thinking.
Exactly. You need to free the leadership to make long-term strategic decisions without worrying about the next quarterly report.
That makes a lot of sense when you put it that way.
And finally, we just have to recognize the immense strategic value of what remains. HMT still possesses these rare niche capabilities, like building those naval directing gears. These are national treasures, technologically speaking.
And if you lose that capability, you can't just get it back overnight.
You might never get it back. Losing them is an irretrievable loss for India's strategic independence.
So as we wrap up, let's just recap this incredible journey. We went from the mother machines that literally built modern India to a company that became a victim of its own success, of complacency, crippling political interference, and of course, the changing economic tides.
It's a tragic arc, but as you said, it's not necessarily over yet. There's an urgent call to action here, and it's aimed squarely at the government.
It is.
What is the final message to the powers that be?
The message is that the central government must make a choice, a real choice. Either commit to revitalizing this vast infrastructure properly with real investment and real autonomy, or just let it go, sell it off, but stop the bleeding.
Because the current approach isn't working.
The current approach of half-hearted efforts waste more time, more money, more potential.
And in the process, we risk losing something truly irreplaceable.
We do. We have to highlight the potential here. HMT possesses these rare capabilities that are national assets. Losing them isn't just a business failure, it's a strategic loss for the entire country. That is a powerful thought to end on. And it leads me to a final provocative thought for you, our listener, to consider. In an era where Make in India is the dominant slogan, where we talk constantly about building our manufacturing capacity, can we really afford to let the company that actually taught India how to make things just fade into history? Or is the cost of that nostalgia and that revival simply too high to pay? Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.